My name is Paddy Cosgrave. I help run Web Summit, which I helped start a decade ago. It's described by some as the biggest tech conference in the world. One way or another, it's a very large tech conference that takes place every year in Lisbon. And we also organize a conference we created in North America, in Canada, in Toronto, called Collision, and other events that we've created around the world. We've spent about a decade building software to try and make events special, magical, better, and the approach seems to have worked. We started a tiny conference with 150 people on the periphery of Europe in Dublin, Ireland. We'd no background in organizing tech conferences or conferences of any sort. And over the last decade, they've grown from nothing to something that a lot of people say nice things about.
So it sounds like your organization grew a lot.
Yeah, it's grown an awful lot. I mean, it started as just ultimately for about a year, just me, and then I was joined by 2 or 3 others, and over time we've grown to about 250 people. They're based all over the world.
We initially connected because we were able to see that you use Officevibe. So I'm very curious, what made you start using Officevibe, or was it from the start? Was it when your team started growing?
I think one of the most important things when you're running a company is understanding the sentiment over time of everyone within the company, of individuals, of teams, of managers. And I couldn't find at the time anything better than Officevibe to do that. It allows people, in my view, express quite openly how they are feeling.
How do you personally interact with Officevibe? Like, do you feel is it a daily thing, a monthly thing? So I want to know, how is it that Officevibe integrates in your very busy life?
It's not so important how it integrates into my life. It's important to other people in the company, and especially for it to be there as a tool when people are not so happy. At a certain point, Officevibe was mandatory, but now it's really there as a place for people to probably more often than not express a degree of dissatisfaction. And it turns out that dissatisfaction, when you actually examine the data that Officevibe gives you, is often much more complex or nuanced as compared to what you might naively assume as the CEO. There's also, in our case, as a company, and this may be different for other companies, the cadence of work or the intensity of work over the course of a quarter, a month, a year changes. Some teams are very busy at certain times of the year or certain weeks in a month, and that can bring with it consequences. If a team is overburdened at certain times of the year, they're going to be stressed. And the information isn't so much for me, to be quite frank. It's for the managers that I work with, and we've got 40 or 50 managers across the company, managing teams of all sorts of varying sizes. And Officevibe has been, incredibly powerful for them. I think oftentimes as a manager, you can feel quite isolated. Some incident, might arise with somebody on your team where they're unhappy with something. And you as a manager may worry that actually this is a much wider problem, and oftentimes it's not. This is a very long-winded way of just saying that Officevibe is very, very helpful for objectively using data, make more informed decisions about what needs to be improved within a company and what doesn't.
I feel like you nailed it in the sense of like the ability to be very specific with what a team is going through, what individuals are going through, what managers are feeling, their inner battles and doubts, and how it'll help them out. Like, I love your answer. I love asking people what they love about Officevibe. So my question to you is, if you could go back in time, let's say before your team really exploded, let's say the first 100 people team you were managing, what is one piece of advice that you would tell yourself back then?
I think where possible, surrounding yourself, if it's possible, with almost an unofficial advisory board to yourself as a manager. If there are 2 or 3 people who are maybe a decade further down the track in management, that can give you a little bit of time when you need it to act as a sounding board when you're faced with an entirely new situation. If you have some wise voices that you can run this particular challenge by, you'll be surprised that oftentimes there's nothing unique about what you're facing. It's unique in your life, and you don't have a clear answer to whatever the particular challenge may be. But talking to other people, I think, is invaluable. Don't underestimate the ability of young people to far ahead of the expected norm in terms of the number of years they need to be working to become effective managers. I think the most important attribute that some people have in spades, and other people need to dedicate some time to developing it, is empathy, and that's shown in lots of interesting studies, that more effective managers tend to be more effective listeners, and they tend to be sensitive to what people are really saying, because oftentimes as a manager, when people come to you with a particular challenge, you do have to read between the lines, and a great manager is able to read the subtext, detect what's really being said when somebody comes to you with a particular kind of challenge.
What things did you put in place, if anything, or you saw other team members in your team doing to cope with the big change, especially in your
Sure. Yeah, well, I'll first say that, we were very fortunate as a company that we already had a work from home policy where effectively anybody could work from home. We had remote teams, we had remote managers. And so the DNA of the company, wasn't a perfect remote company, but we had a lot of the base ingredients, which made the transition easier. Certainly the first 3 months of the pandemic, where we weren't all terrified that running Collision online for the very first time, all on our own software, wasn't going to work out. We of course were terrified that could happen, but it's I get to work with an amazing group of people that figured it all out.
What is one challenge that you still struggle with as a manager that you're like, I'm still working on?
I mean, me personally, I've never had a boss, so I don't really know what good feedback or a good executive looks like, and I suffer daily from imposter syndrome. So when it comes to giving feedback to people, me personally, I find that very difficult to impossible to do, because I think it's almost being dishonest with my senior leaders in my company, who are world class at the individual things that they do. I think it's baseless if I guide them on how they should be better executives. We provide, really brilliant executive coaches and performance psychologists to all our top executives to help them, as well as giving them access to doing executive education really in any of the world's leading universities and business schools.
If you have one maybe memory or story of maybe a moment where you began to be a manager. So when you realize, it's my job to step up and either help my team or help this person.
As an entrepreneur, I mean, this is very self-indulgent. You are possibly by circumstance or by design or some combination of both, obsessive and passionate about what you're doing. That has to be nurtured over time. So that would be the first thing. And I often think, as a entrepreneur manager, when you're starting a company that you're going to be particularly passionate about, you can't expect that everybody that comes through the door is going to be as passionate about you. You have to be the most passionate person, and you have to manage the expectations of those that join you, and you have to realize that your responsibility is that if you do want other people to be passionate as opposed to dispassionate, then your job is to nurture that passion inside other people. When you start a business, you probably start out being a jack of all trades or a Jane of all trades. You're doing a little bit of everything. And you have to realize quite quickly that you're probably not good at any one specific thing. You're just actually very average at a lot of things. And if you're to be successful, you have to hire people who are more capable at specific things than you. So a finance person, a better CTO, somebody who's in charge of design. You might be okay at each one of those little things, but ultimately you need better people. And then eventually you absolutely have to get to a position where you become incredibly insecure as the founder of a company, that you're basically no longer needed. You really should not be needed. That's in my view, you're beginning to reach a point where maybe the organization is succeeding.
I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Like 2 minutes to see if you had any questions for us.
I mean, not really. I mean, I think Officevibe is an incredibly powerful product. Yeah, I mean, it's the most powerful product we use for people management, and we don't use it perfectly all the time, but it's there as a very useful outlet for when people are, not entirely satisfied. Which, let's be totally frank, there are 52 weeks in a year, and not every week of an entire year is the best week of any of our lives. We definitely have bad weeks. And if there's a mechanism there to capture your change in mood or your views on certain things, that's incredibly powerful. And the fact that it's anonymous, I think, gives people the freedom to really express how they feel. And for that, I think Officevibe, at least for us, has been invaluable.
Well, thank you so much. We're so happy to have you as an ambassador. We're always here to help. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your struggles. Being a manager, it's such a complex art, and it's humans dealing with humans, so that's always going to be its own art in itself. So it was amazing to have you here telling us a little bit about you and your story. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. It was great, Anna. Great.